Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. Lauren's laughter carried through the house, light and airy, like nothing had changed. But it wasn't real. I could tell. It was like a radio station just out of tune, close enough to fool you, but the static still grates. I stood in the kitchen, hands braced on the counter, staring at the empty coffee mug she left behind. Claire's voice came from the living room, chattering away to the TV, oblivious. "Late tonight," Lauren said, breezing past me. She wasn't looking at me. Not really. Her coat hung neatly over one arm, the same coat she'd bought a few months back, but never worn for me. "Again?" My voice came out rougher than I meant. She paused, hand on the doorframe, her back to me. "Yeah, big project. You know how it is." I didn't answer. She turned her head, just enough for me to see the corner of her lips tilt up. "Don't wait up, okay?" And just like that, she was gone. The door clicked shut, and I stared at the space where she'd stood. My mind replayed the little things, the faint scent of perfume she hadn't worn in years, the way she'd turned her phone face down on the table during breakfast, the late-night texts she'd dismissed as work emergencies. Claire's face popped around the corner, her hair a mess from where she'd been lying on the carpet. "Where's Mum going?" "Work, sweetheart." I forced a smile, but she didn't look convinced. She chewed her lip, studying me in that way only kids could, like she saw through me completely. "Okay," she said finally, disappearing back into the living room. I grabbed my jacket. The restaurant didn't need me tonight, but I needed air. I needed space from the walls of this house, from the ghost of Lauren's smile. The walk to the park near our house usually calmed me. Tonight, the cold bit at my skin, and the street lamps flickered as I passed. A chill crawled up my spine, and for a moment, I swore I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, but the street was empty, just shadows playing tricks. I rubbed a hand over my face and kept walking. By the time I reached the park bench, I'd convinced myself I was imagining things. Still, unease sat heavy in my chest. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through unread emails. Anything to distract myself. My thumb froze over one that caught my eye. Final warning. Overdue payment. It was from one of our suppliers. I opened it, skimming the overdue balance. I'd cleared this 2 weeks ago, had the receipt to prove it. My stomach twisted. A mistake. Or something worse. The cold wind picked up, pushing me to head home. I pocketed my phone and started back, my thoughts racing. When I reached the doorstep, an envelope was waiting for me, stark white against the dark wood. No postage stamp, no name, just my address written in tight, deliberate handwriting. I picked it up, the paper smooth but heavy. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. The words scrawled across it chilled me more than the wind. "You don't know who your enemy is." I stood there on the doorstep, staring at the note. The words sharp and black, like they'd been etched into my brain. "You don't know who your enemy is." The paper trembled slightly in my hands. No, my hands trembled. I glanced down the street. Empty. Porch lights blinked here and there, their soft glow casting long shadows on the pavement. A car rumbled past at the end of the block, its taillights disappearing into the dark. The house loomed behind me, silent except for the faint hum of the fridge inside. Claire would be drawing or coloring, and I could imagine her legs kicked up on the couch. Lauren was somewhere, working late, always working late. I folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket, locking the door behind me. "Dad?" Claire's voice floated from the living room. I poked my head around the corner. She was stretched out on the rug, crayons scattered around her like a rainbow had exploded. "Yeah, sweetheart." She held up a drawing, a stick figure family, me, Lauren, her, all holding hands in front of a big yellow sun. "Do you like it?" "It's perfect." "You think Mum will like it too?" "She'll love it," I said, though my throat felt tight. She grinned and went back to coloring, but the innocent question stayed with me. I wandered into the kitchen, pulling the letter out of my pocket. The words hadn't changed, though they felt heavier now. I knew what I should do. Call Lauren. Ask if she'd gotten anything like this. Maybe call Tom, my old buddy from university who'd left the police force to start a PI business. But something stopped me. I turned the letter over, searching for a clue. Nothing. No watermark, no signature, just those 6 words, written in clean, deliberate strokes. My phone buzzed on the counter, jolting me. I grabbed it, half expecting something equally cryptic, but it was Lauren. Lauren, won't be home tonight. Project's taking longer than expected. Don't wait up. For a second, I wanted to smash the phone against the counter. Instead, I shoved it back in my pocket. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table, the letter in front of me. I tried to piece it together. Was this tied to the overdue payment email? Was it someone from the restaurant, an unhappy customer, or maybe a supplier we pissed off? Or was it personal? I thought about Lauren again. The way she'd smiled this morning, brittle and forced. The messages on her phone that she was quick to delete. The new perfume. Dad? Claire's voice startled me. She stood in the doorway, her hair sticking up like she'd been lying on the carpet. Her sketch pad was tucked under her arm. You okay? She asked. Yeah. My voice came out too flat. I forced a smile, just thinking about some work stuff. She tilted her head, studying me. Kids always know more than they let on. Do you want me to draw you something? She asked. I nodded. That'd be great, sweetheart. Something nice. Her face lit up. She darted back to the living room, her little footsteps padding against the floor. When she was gone, I stared at the letter again, my thoughts looping back to the same nagging question. Who sent this? It didn't matter. Whoever it was, they'd just made a mistake. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, too warm for the icy knot in my stomach. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the comforting kind. Lauren had left early again, her presence reduced to the faint smell of perfume lingering in the hallway. I sat at the kitchen table, Claire across from me, her face buried in her coloring book. Her crayons scratched against the page with furious intent, oblivious to the storm in my head. Mum said she'll be late again, she asked, not looking up. I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee. Yeah, big project, remember? Claire shrugged, unconvinced. She's always busy. I didn't know what to say to that, so I let the silence grow. After Claire disappeared to the living room, her sketchpad in tow, I stayed at the table. My phone buzzed on the counter, but I ignored it. Emails, supplier invoices, a world of normal problems that didn't matter right now. I thought about Lauren, the way she brushed past me last night without really seeing me. The late nights, the excuses, the phone she'd been clutching a little too tightly. She barely let it out of her hand for weeks. My stomach twisted. I'd never doubted her before. Never wanted to. But things didn't add up. By the time she came home that night, I was waiting. I didn't mean to be obvious about it, but the way her eyes darted over me, she knew. You're up late, she said, setting her bag down by the door. Her voice was light, casual, but her hands were stiff as she hung up her coat. Couldn't sleep, I replied. She moved past me, heading toward the bedroom. Her phone buzzed in her hand, and she glanced at it, her fingers tapping the screen quickly. She didn't notice me watching. Work again? I asked, my voice steady. She turned, her brow furrowing. What? The late nights, I said, standing. The locked phone. The messages. I figured it must be work, right? Her lips parted slightly, her expression carefully neutral. What's that supposed to mean? I don't know. You tell me. She sighed, brushing past me. You're being ridiculous. Am I? Her back stiffened, but she didn't turn around. I leaned against the counter, watching her retreating form. Your boss must be thrilled with all the extra hours you're putting in. What's his name again? She froze in the doorway, her knuckles white against the frame. "You're imagining things," she said without turning around. "Am I?" Her shoulders rose and fell sharply, but she didn't answer. She disappeared into the bedroom, the door clicking shut behind her. I exhaled, trying to push down the anger simmering in my chest. I wanted to storm after her, demand answers, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed more than my gut. I grabbed my phone off the counter, scrolling through my contacts. Tom Green. I hovered over the name for a moment before tapping it. It rang twice before his voice came through, groggy and annoyed. "Mike, do you know what time it is?" "I need a favor," I said, ignoring the tone. There was a pause on the other end. "This better be important." "It is." My grip tightened on the phone. "I think Lauren's hiding something, and I need your help to figure out what." Tom leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. His small office smelled faintly of burnt coffee, the blinds half drawn to block out the midday sun. The clutter of files and papers on his desk made it clear he hadn't expected company. "Let me get this straight," he said, steepling his fingers. "You think Lauren's cheating on you, but you're not sure." I shifted in my seat. "I don't know if it's that, but something's going on. She's working late every night, guarding her phone like it's the crown jewels. And you don't trust her," Tom cut in, his tone flat. My jaw tightened. I wouldn't be here if I did. Tom stared at me for a long moment, his eyes sharp but unreadable. Then he leaned forward, pulling a notepad from under a stack of files. "All right, let's start with the basics. What makes you think it's more than just work?" I hesitated, my thoughts a tangled mess. She's distant, like really distant. And last night, her phone buzzed. Some guy named Daniel. The message was, "Too friendly, not business." "Daniel who?" "I don't know. That's why I'm here." Tom scribbled something on his pad, his pen scratching against the paper. "You're asking me to dig into her. That's a big step, Mike. I don't have a choice." The words came out harder than I intended. "I've got Claire to think about. And the business. If she's hiding something that could blow all this up, I need to know before it's too late." Tom nodded slowly, his gaze flicking to the photo on his desk. It was old, faded, a younger version of him in a uniform, standing next to a beat-up patrol car. "All right, but if I'm doing this, I'm not pulling punches. You ready for that?" I didn't hesitate. "Yeah." "Good." He flipped the notepad shut and stood. "I'll start with her office, see what she's really doing during these late nights. But you need to prepare yourself, Mike. If there's something to find, it's not going to be pretty." I stood too, shaking his hand. "Thanks, Tom. Just keep it quiet. Claire doesn't need to know." He nodded once, his grip firm. "I'll be in touch." The ride home felt longer than usual. The streets blurred past, my thoughts racing. I hated this, hated what it made me feel. Paranoid, suspicious. Lauren and I had built a life together, fought through rough patches, but this felt different. When I got home, Claire was in the living room, a fortress of cushions and blankets spread across the floor. She grinned when she saw me. "You're back. Can we watch the movie now?" "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. As she queued up the film, I settled onto the couch, trying to shake the weight in my chest. Her laughter during the opening credits was like a balm, but it didn't last. My mind kept drifting to Lauren, to Tom, to Daniel. Claire leaned against me, her small hand tugging at my sleeve. "Dad, you're not watching." I blinked, turning to her. "Sorry, sweetheart. Just thinking. About work." I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. She frowned, her eyes narrowing. "Is Mum okay?" "She's been weird lately." The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "She's fine, kiddo. Don't worry about that, okay?" Claire nodded, but the doubt lingered in her eyes. As the movie played on, I couldn't help but wonder if I was doing the right thing, if uncovering the truth would protect my family, or shatter it. Tom's text came late that night. Just 2 words. Got something. I stared at my phone, the screen casting a cold glow in the darkened living room. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the fridge. Lauren had retreated to the bedroom hours ago, claiming exhaustion, and Claire was asleep upstairs. The message sat there like a stone in my chest. I typed back, "What is it?" His response came almost immediately. "Photos. Meet tomorrow." The next day, Tom's office felt even smaller, his desk buried under a new wave of files. He slid an envelope across to me, his face unreadable. "Take a look." My fingers hesitated over the flap before pulling it open. Inside were glossy, color-printed photos. Lauren was in every single one. The first was her at a cafe I didn't recognize, sitting across from a man I could only assume was Daniel. He was older than I expected, polished, sharp. His suit looked expensive, his posture casual but commanding. The next photo showed them standing outside, close enough that it felt intimate. Lauren's face was tilted up toward his, her expression unreadable. I clenched the edges of the photo. "When were these taken?" "2 days ago," Tom said, leaning back in his chair. I tailed her after work. She left the office and went straight there. "What about him?" I asked, flipping through the photos. Tom opened a file and handed me a printout. "Daniel Cross. Big shot in the investment world. Runs his own firm, Cross Capital. Got a reputation for being ruthless in business, shady deals, hostile takeovers, that kind of thing." I scanned the page, my gut twisting tighter with every word. "Here's the kicker," Tom continued. "I dug a little deeper into his connections. He's been sniffing around your restaurant chain." "What?" Tom nodded grimly. "Cross Capital acquired a minority stake in a couple of suppliers you use. Small enough to stay under the radar, but enough to apply pressure if he wanted to." I sank back in the chair, my mind reeling. The late nights, the guarded phone, the message from Daniel. It wasn't just an affair. It was a plan. A deliberate move to dismantle everything I'd built. "I don't get it," I muttered. "What's Lauren's angle? She's not stupid. She wouldn't." I trailed off, unsure if I believed my own words. Tom's voice was steady, cutting through my thoughts. "Sometimes people make deals they think they can control. They don't realize they're the ones being played." I stared at the photos again. Lauren looked calm, even confident, but there was something in her eyes, something I hadn't noticed before. Fear. That night, I waited up for her again. She came home later than usual, her heels clicking softly on the floor. When she saw me sitting in the dark, her hand paused on the light switch. "Mike, what are you doing up?" "Waiting." She frowned, setting her bag down. "For what?" "For you to tell me what's really going on." Her face hardened, the shift so quick it felt rehearsed. "We've talked about this. It's work. I don't know what else you want me to say." I held up the photo of her with Daniel, the one where they stood too close. Her expression didn't change, but her hand gripped the back of the chair. "Care to explain this?" She looked at the photo for a long moment before meeting my eyes. "It's not what you think." I laughed, the sound bitter. "Then what is it, Lauren? Because it looks like you've been lying to me." "For weeks. I've been trying to save us," she snapped, her voice rising for the first time. "The restaurant, the debt, everything. Daniel can help." "Help?" I stood, towering over her. "He's not helping you. He's using you." Her jaw clenched, but she didn't deny it. "You should have come to me," I said, my voice low. "You couldn't fix this," she said, her tone cold. "You're too close to it. You don't see how bad it's gotten." I stepped back, the words hitting harder than I expected. She moved past me, grabbing her bag. "I'm going to bed. You should too." I let her go, watching as she disappeared down the hallway. But in my gut, I knew this wasn't over. Daniel Cross wasn't just some obstacle. He was a threat. And if Lauren wouldn't protect our family from him, I would. Tom didn't waste time. By the end of the week, I had a stack of files, surveillance photos, and a growing sense of dread. Every piece of information painted a picture of a man who wasn't just dangerous. He was a predator. Daniel Cross had built his empire by exploiting the desperate. He found weak points, financial struggles, failing businesses, personal insecurities, and turned them into leverage. Once he had control, he squeezed. Businesses folded, lives ruined. He walked away richer every time. And now he had his sights set on me. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with Tom's dossier spread out in front of me. Lauren's car wasn't in the driveway, and Claire was asleep upstairs. The silence felt too heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. I flipped through the photos again. One showed Lauren and Daniel in a private room at a restaurant I didn't recognize. The way he leaned in, smiling, his hand resting on hers, it wasn't just business. It couldn't be. Tom's notes filled in the gaps. Daniel had a reputation for charming his way into people's lives, especially women. He wasn't above using personal relationships to close deals or gain insider information. I clenched my fists, anger bubbling under the surface. Lauren thought she could control this, that she could outsmart him. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Tom. "Mike," he said when I answered, his voice low. "You sitting down?" "Yeah." "Good. I've got something else for you. It's bigger than I thought." "What is it?" He sighed. "Cross isn't just looking at your business. He's actively moving on it. He's been buying out suppliers you depend on. Quietly. A couple of them have already signed exclusive contracts with him, which means I lose them." I finished, my jaw tightening. "Exactly. And he's not stopping there. He's looking for ways to destabilize your finances. If he can tie you up in a legal battle or an audit, you're done." My grip on the phone tightened. "And Lauren? From what I've seen, he's using her to gain access. She's feeding him information, whether she realizes it or not. But it's not just business with her, Mike. The way he operates, it's personal." I didn't respond. The words hit too hard, too close to the fear I'd been burying. "Listen," Tom said. "You've got to act now. If you don't cut this off, he'll bleed you dry." I thanked him and hung up, my thoughts racing. Lauren came home late again, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She found me in the kitchen, the table still littered with the evidence Tom had gathered. Her face hardened the moment she saw it. "What's this?" "You tell me," I said, standing. "You've been working with him, haven't you? Feeding him everything he needs to tear me apart." Her eyes darted to the photos, the files, her mask of calm cracking. "It's not like that." "Then what is it?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you sold us out. The restaurant. Claire. Me. I did this for us." She snapped, her voice sharp and defensive. "You don't understand how close we were to losing everything." Daniel offered a way out. "By dragging us into his mess. By letting him dismantle everything I've built." "I thought I could handle it," she said, her voice faltering. "Well, you can't," I said, slamming my hand on the table. "He's playing you, Lauren. And when he's done, he's going to leave you with nothing." She stared at me, her eyes glistening. But no tears fell. She wasn't the crying type. "I didn't know," she whispered finally. "I didn't know it would go this far." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she'd been manipulated, that she wasn't complicit in this. But the anger burned too hot. "Then stop lying to yourself," I said, my voice cold. "Because this isn't just about you anymore. It's about Claire. And I won't let her lose everything because you made a deal with the devil." She didn't answer, just turned and walked out of the room. The bedroom door clicked shut moments later. I stared at the table, at the mess of papers that represented my life falling apart. My hands shook, but I steadied them. The next morning, I was done waiting. If Daniel Cross thought he could manipulate Lauren and dismantle my life, he'd learn he'd underestimated me. I started by calling Tom. Anything new? I asked, gripping the phone so tightly it creaked. Just digging deeper into his web, Tom said. Cross doesn't do anything without a backup plan. The guy's a master chess player, always thinking 3 moves ahead. Well, it's time he faced someone who plays dirty. Tom chuckled. That's the spirit. What's your move? I need to know where he's vulnerable, I said. There's got to be something in his empire I can use. He's not untouchable. Not untouchable, but slippery as hell, Tom said. You want leverage. I'll dig faster. Might take a few days. Do it. While Tom worked his angle, I started mine. Daniel Cross wasn't just a name anymore. He was a face, a presence I couldn't shake. I found myself poring over his history, learning everything I could about him. His reputation for ruthless business tactics wasn't just gossip. It was a trail of lawsuits, ruined companies, and people he'd stepped on to climb higher. But there was something else, a pattern. He didn't just dismantle businesses. He humiliated their owners, dragging them through public scandals and legal battles. It wasn't enough for him to win. He needed his enemies destroyed. That wasn't going to be me. It was 2 days later when Tom called again. Got something, he said. It's not much, but it's a crack in his armor. What is it? One of his former partners, Susan Lee. She co-founded Cross Capital with him, but he pushed her out a few years ago. Word is, it wasn't clean. There's bad blood. I sat up straighter. How bad? She won't talk to reporters or lawyers, but she might talk to someone with the right pitch. If anyone knows where the bodies are buried, it's her. I was already grabbing my keys. Where do I find her? Susan Lee lived in a modest townhouse on the other side of the city, a far cry from the luxury penthouses Daniel occupied. When she answered the door, she looked wary, her eyes flicking over me like she was measuring the weight of my problems. I don't do interviews, she said flatly. I'm not a reporter, I said. I'm Michael Rivers, and I need your help. Her brow furrowed, but she didn't shut the door. Rivers, the restaurant guy. That's me. And right now, Daniel Cross is coming for everything I've built. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Of course he is. Look, I said, lowering my voice. I know you have no reason to help me, but if there's anything at all, you can tell me about him. It could make all the difference. She hesitated, her hand tightening on the doorframe. Then she stepped aside. Come in. Her living room was small but tidy, filled with books and framed photos. She sat on the couch, gesturing for me to take the chair across from her. Why now? She asked. Because he's got my wife wrapped around his finger, I said. And because I'm not going to let him destroy my family. Her expression softened slightly, but she still looked guarded. Daniel is methodical, she said slowly. He doesn't just go after businesses. He goes after people. Weaknesses, vulnerabilities. That's where he strikes. And once he's in, it's almost impossible to get him out. I leaned forward. How do I stop him? Susan's eyes darkened. You don't play his game. You make him play yours. Daniel thrives on control. If you take that from him, he crumbles. And how do I do that? Her gaze locked with mine. Expose him. Show the world what he really is. But you'll need proof. And the only place you'll find that is in his records. Financials, emails, deals he's tried to hide. He keeps everything because he thinks no one can touch him. My heart pounded. Do you know where I could find those records? She hesitated, then nodded. He has a private server at his main office. Everything runs through there, but it's locked down tight. You'd need access codes, physical access. I'll figure it out, I said, standing. She looked at me like she wanted to say more, but instead she simply said, be careful. He doesn't just destroy reputations. He destroys lives. I parked 2 blocks away from Cross Capital, gripping the steering wheel tighter than I should have. The city hummed around me. Traffic, footsteps, lives moving on, blissfully unaware of the minefield I was stepping into. Susan's words echoed in my head. You can't play his game. You have to make him play yours. I'd been a step behind Daniel Cross for too long, watching him manipulate Lauren, dismantle my business, and tighten his grip on my family. That ended today. The lobby of Cross Capital was cold and sleek, all polished marble and glass. The receptionist barely glanced up as I approached the counter. "Michael Rivers," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "I have a meeting with Daniel Cross." Her smile was thin, practiced. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." Her fingers paused over her keyboard. "But if you tell him I'm here," I continued, leaning closer, "I promise he'll want to see me." She hesitated, then picked up the phone, her voice low. I didn't hear what she said, but it didn't take long before her expression tightened. "He's in a meeting," she said, her tone brisk. "You'll have to schedule." "I'll wait." Her mouth opened to protest, but something in my face must have stopped her. I moved to a chair in the corner, crossing my arms and settling in. It took 20 minutes, long enough for me to start doubting myself, to wonder if this was a mistake. Then the elevator doors opened, and there he was, Daniel Cross. He strode into the lobby like he owned the air in it, his suit tailored to perfection, his movements fluid. For a split second, I understood why people underestimated him. He looked more like a movie star than a predator. When his eyes landed on me, a flicker of surprise passed across his face. He recovered quickly, his lips curling into a polite, almost condescending smile. "Mr. Rivers," he said, his voice smooth. "What a surprise." "Not for me," I said, standing. "Walk with me," he said, gesturing toward the elevator. I hesitated, but followed. The doors closed behind us, and suddenly it was just the two of us, the hum of the elevator the only sound. "You've got nerve showing up here," he said, still smiling. "I'd say the same to you," I replied. "But you've been poking around my life for weeks now." His smile widened. "It's nothing personal, Michael. Just business." "Business," I repeated, the word like poison on my tongue. "Is that what you call tearing apart my family, using my wife, cutting off my suppliers?" He tilted his head, feigning innocence. "I didn't realize you'd taken it so personally. But that's the problem with small businesses. They're fragile, vulnerable. Not mine." He chuckled, low and mocking. "That's where you're wrong." The elevator dinged, opening to a private conference room. He gestured for me to follow, his movements casual. I stepped inside, my fists clenching at the sight of the lavish setup. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a massive mahogany table, walls lined with bookshelves that probably never got touched. He closed the door behind us. "So," he said, turning to face me, "what exactly do you think you're going to accomplish here?" I didn't flinch. "I want you to back off. Leave my family, my business, and my wife alone." He laughed outright this time, his voice echoing in the room. "Leave your wife alone. She came to me, Michael. She needed a way out, and I gave her one. If you couldn't provide that, maybe you should be asking yourself why." Anger surged, but I forced it down. "And now," I asked, "what do you think happens next? You think I'll just roll over while you take everything from me?" His smile faded, replaced by something colder. "I think you'll do exactly that, because I've seen men like you before, small-time operators with big dreams and no clue how to protect them. You're out of your depth, Michael." I stepped closer, my voice dropping. "Maybe. But I know your type too. You rely on control, on knowing everything, owning everyone. What happens when someone takes that away from you?" His eyes narrowed, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Susan Lee says hello." The shift was immediate. His smile dropped completely, his posture stiffening. For the first time, I saw the crack in his armor. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he said, his voice cold. "Maybe not," I said, "but I know this. If you come after my family again, I'll drag you down with me." You might win, but it'll cost you more than you're willing to pay." For a long moment he said nothing. Then his lips curved into a thin, menacing smile. "We'll see, Michael." I left the building with adrenaline pumping through my veins, the city air biting at my skin. I'd rattled him, but it wasn't enough. If Daniel Cross thought he could intimidate me, he was in for a rude awakening. Back in my car, I pulled out my phone and texted Tom. "It's time." The drive home felt longer than usual, the city blurring past the windshield as I replayed my encounter with Daniel Cross. His words, his smirk, the crack in his facade when I mentioned Susan. Everything was a weapon now. But rattling him wasn't enough. I needed to hit him where it hurt. The second I walked through the door, I knew something was wrong. The house was too quiet. No hum of the TV from the living room, no chatter from Claire's room. I found Lauren sitting at the kitchen table, her phone in her hand, her face pale. She didn't look up when I entered. "Lauren?" She glanced at me, her eyes hollow. "He called me." I froze. "Daniel?" She nodded, her fingers gripping the phone like it was a lifeline. He's furious. Mike. He said you're making things worse." "Worse?" I barked, my voice sharp. "You mean worse for him." She flinched, and I forced myself to soften. "What did he say, Lauren?" She swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said if you keep pushing, he'll destroy everything. The restaurant, our finances, Claire's school fund, everything. And he can do it. Mike, you saw what he's already done." "Let him try," I said, my jaw tightening. "Mike, you don't understand. I understand perfectly," I said, cutting her off. "He's a bully. And bullies only win if you let them." Her expression hardened, but there was fear behind it. I leaned on the counter, meeting her gaze. "I'm trying to protect us. And I need you to trust me." Her lips pressed together. And for a moment, I thought she might argue. But then she sighed, slumping in her chair. "What are you going to do?" "Whatever it takes," I said. The next day, I met Tom in the dim back corner of a diner. He had a laptop open, his face lit by the glow of the screen. "You've been busy," he said as I slid into the booth. "So have you," I replied, nodding toward the laptop. "What's the verdict?" Tom turned the screen toward me. It showed a map of Cross Capital's office building, complete with security cameras, access points, and a detailed floor plan. "You weren't kidding about the server," he said. "It's in a secure room on the top floor, card access only, cameras everywhere. And the codes." He shook his head. "Not something I can get remotely. You'll need someone on the inside." "Lauren?" Tom raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that? After everything?" "No," I admitted, "but she's the only one who can get close enough." Tom leaned back, crossing his arms. "You've got a death wish, Mike. Cross isn't just playing games here. He's ruthless. That's why we can't back down," I said. "If we let him control the board, we lose. But if we take his queen, we change the game," Tom finished, nodding. That night, I laid it all out for Lauren. The plan, the risks, the payoff. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands folded tightly together. "You want me to get into Daniel's office," she said slowly, her voice skeptical. "Yes." "And what happens when he finds out?" "He won't," I said. "Not if we do this right. All you have to do is get me access to his server. I'll handle the rest." She stared at me, her expression unreadable. "This isn't just about the business, is it?" "No," I admitted. "It's about him. He doesn't just take things. He destroys people." Her gaze dropped to the table. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then she nodded. "All right," she said softly. "But if this goes wrong, Mike?" "It won't," I said, though the weight in my chest made me wonder if I believed it. Lauren made the call the next morning. She told Daniel she wanted to meet, said she needed to reassess their arrangement. I didn't ask for details, But when she left the house, her hands were trembling. From a parked car down the street, I watched her enter Cross Capital, my heart pounding in my ears. I had no way of knowing what was happening inside, but I trusted her. I had to. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a text. "Lauren, you're in. Don't make me regret this." That night, I sat in the glow of my laptop, staring at the files I'd pulled from Daniel's server. They were worse than I'd expected. Shady deals, bribes, threats, all tied to names I recognized. Suppliers, competitors, even local officials. The files were a ticking bomb. As I sat in the glow of the laptop, scrolling through the depths of Daniel's empire, one thing became clear. This wasn't just leverage. It was a blueprint to destroy him. Bribes to city officials, blackmail material on competitors, questionable tax filings. It was all here, tied to Daniel Cross in ways that even his team of lawyers couldn't untangle. But it wasn't just him. The folder labeled Rivers felt like a personal invasion. Every detail of my life, accounts, transactions, even private emails between Lauren and me, was laid bare. There were even school records for Claire. My stomach churned. This wasn't business. It was war. The next morning, I met Tom at the diner again. This time, the air between us was heavier. "Did you look through all of it?" he asked as I slid into the booth. I nodded, sliding a USB drive across the table. "This is everything. Enough to bury him." Tom picked it up, turning it over in his hand. "You're sure about this? Once you go down this road, there's no coming back." "I wasn't the one who declared war," I said. "He came for my family, Tom. I'm just giving him what he deserves." Tom leaned back, tapping the USB against the table. "What's the play?" "We leaked this," I said, my voice steady. "The bribes, the blackmail, the shady deals, everything. But we have to be smart. If it comes from me, he'll spin it as a personal attack." Tom nodded slowly. "Anonymous source, strategic timing. It could work, but you realize what happens when this hits, right? He'll come after you harder." "Let him," I said, the anger simmering beneath my words. I'm done playing defense. The plan came together quickly. Tom reached out to a few trusted journalists, feeding them just enough to pique their interest without revealing the full picture. Meanwhile, I began shoring up my own defenses. I called suppliers, renewing contracts with ironclad terms that cut Daniel out completely. I moved what little savings we had into a separate account, out of his reach. I even met with Claire's school principal, ensuring her records were secure. But the hardest conversation was with Lauren. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her face pale as I explained what I'd found. "He had everything on us," I said, sliding the file across to her. "Our finances, the restaurant, even Claire." Her hands trembled as she opened the folder, her eyes scanning the pages. When she looked up, her expression was a mix of fear and guilt. "I didn't know it was this bad," she whispered. She stared at the file for a long moment before meeting my eyes. "What do we do now?" "We fight," I said simply, "but I need you to be all in." Her lips pressed together, and for a moment I thought she might argue. But then she nodded. "I'm with you." The first article dropped 3 days later. A small investigative piece about Cross Capital's questionable tactics, just enough to plant the seed. Daniel's name wasn't front and center, yet, but the implications were clear. 2 days after that, the second article hit. This time, it was more direct, linking Daniel to several bribery cases and fraudulent contracts. The media began circling like sharks, and the whispers of a federal investigation started to surface. Daniel's response was swift. The first blow came through a cease and desist letter, delivered to my restaurant by a man in a sharp suit and an even sharper sneer. I crumpled it and tossed it in the trash. The second came in the form of a supplier suddenly canceling their contract, citing unforeseen circumstances. It was a hit, but I'd seen it coming. By the time the third blow landed, A smear campaign about my mismanagement of the restaurant. It was clear Daniel was in full retaliation mode. But I was ready. Tom had anticipated every move, lining up countermeasures that hit back harder. When one supplier dropped us, another stepped in. When his PR team pushed their narrative, the journalist we'd worked with released another damning piece, this time directly tying Daniel to embezzlement. The final strike came from a source I hadn't expected. Susan Lee. She called me late one night, her voice sharp but urgent. "I've got something," she said. "Something big." "What is it?" "Proof of a deal he made 5 years ago. It wasn't just shady, it was illegal. If this gets out, he's finished. Send it to me." I said. "No," she replied. "Not yet. This needs to come out at the right time, or he'll bury it. I'll handle the timing. You just need to be ready." I hung up, my pulse racing. The endgame was in sight. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. Daniel's carefully crafted empire was beginning to crack, the weight of his secrets finally catching up to him. But I knew better than to celebrate too soon. Because men like Daniel Cross don't go down without a fight. And the fight wasn't over yet. Daniel Cross didn't just fight back. He came at me like a cornered predator, sharp and merciless. I'd underestimated just how far he was willing to go. The first sign of trouble came one morning when I walked into the restaurant. The air was heavy, the usual buzz of activity replaced by hushed whispers. My manager, Tony, met me near the kitchen, his face pale. "Mike," he said, his voice tight, "you need to see this." He handed me a tablet. My stomach sank as I read the headline. Rivers Restaurant Empire under investigation for tax fraud. It wasn't just a smear campaign, it was official. The article cited leaked documents that painted a picture of financial mismanagement and fraud. "I didn't even know there was an investigation," Tony said, his voice rising. "Is this for real?" "It's not," I said, my voice steady despite the panic clawing at my chest. "This is Cross. He's fabricating all of it." But the damage was done. The article was everywhere. Local news, social media, even business blogs. Customers began canceling reservations. Suppliers started asking questions. By the time I left the restaurant that afternoon, the cracks were spreading faster than I could contain them. At home, Lauren was waiting for me in the kitchen, the TV muted but still showing a news anchor discussing the allegations. She turned to me, her face tight with worry. "Mike," she said, holding up her phone. "It's worse than we thought." She handed it to me. A chain of emails, supposedly between me and a fictitious accountant, detailed fraudulent transactions, hidden accounts, and forged tax documents. My hands trembled as I scrolled. "These aren't real." "I know," Lauren said, "but whoever made them knows what they're doing. It looks airtight." I slammed the phone on the counter. "This is Cross. He's trying to bury me before I can finish him." "And what if it works?" Lauren asked, her voice trembling. "What if the authorities believe it?" "They won't," I said, though my conviction was wavering. "I just need time to prove it." She pressed a hand to her forehead. "Time. Mike, we don't have time. Claire's hearing about this at school. Tony's panicking. If Cross can do this, what else can he do?" I didn't answer. I didn't know. That night, Tom and I met in his cramped office, the fluorescent light buzzing overhead. "He's framing me," I said, pacing. "Tax fraud, fake emails, it's all him. But I can't prove it." Tom tapped on his laptop, his brow furrowed. "This is next level. He's not just trying to discredit you. He's trying to take you out of the equation entirely. If the feds get involved, they'll freeze everything." I finished. "The accounts, the restaurants, everything." Tom nodded. "Exactly. And once that happens, he can swoop in and save the business by buying it out for pennies." I stopped pacing, turning to him. "So what do we do?" Tom leaned back, his fingers steepled. "We hit back. Hard. But we need that ace up our sleeve, the one Susan promised. If it's as big as she says, it might be enough to turn this around. The call from Susan came late that night. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "It's ready," she said. "I've sent the files to a contact of mine. He's a journalist, one of the good ones. The story goes live tomorrow." "What's in it?" I asked, gripping the phone. "Everything," she said. "Fraud, insider trading, bribery, all tied to Daniel Cross. And unlike what he's throwing at you, this is real. Once it's out, he won't be able to spin it." For the first time in days, hope flickered in my chest. "Thank you, Susan." "Don't thank me yet," she said. "This isn't over. Cross isn't the type to go down quietly." The article hit like a bomb. By noon, every major news outlet was running the story. The dark empire of Daniel Cross. The piece exposed decades of corruption, complete with financial records, whistleblower accounts, and direct ties to government officials. For the first time, Daniel Cross was on the defensive. But he wasn't done with me. That evening, as I left the restaurant, a police car was waiting for me. 2 officers stepped out, their faces grim. "Michael Rivers." "Yes," I said, my stomach sinking. "You're under arrest for tax fraud and falsifying financial records. You have the right to remain silent." Their voices blurred as they cuffed me, dragging me toward the car. A crowd had gathered, phones out, recording every second. As the car pulled away, my mind raced. The holding cell was cold, the fluorescent lights overhead casting a harsh glow on the concrete walls. I sat on the hard bench, my hands clasped tightly, my mind replaying the moment the cuffs had clicked around my wrists. The only thing keeping me from sinking into despair was the thought of Lauren and Claire. They were the reason I couldn't give up, the reason I had to find a way out of this. The sound of a guard's footsteps broke the silence. "Rivers," he called. "You've got a visitor." I stood, my body stiff from hours of sitting. As I followed him to the visitation room, my heart raced. I wasn't sure who I expected, Tom maybe, but when I saw Lauren sitting on the other side of the glass, my breath caught. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her makeup was smudged, her blazer wrinkled, but her eyes were fierce. I picked up the receiver. "You didn't have to come," I said. "Of course I did." She shot back, gripping her side of the phone. "Mike, what's happening?" "They froze everything. Our accounts, the restaurant. Claire doesn't understand what's going on. She's terrified." "I know," I said, guilt stabbing through me. "This is Daniel. He's trying to bury me before the truth catches up to him." "Then what do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "The article's out. Tom says the authorities are already looking into him, but that won't be enough. He's coming for everything, and he won't stop until he knows we're broken." Lauren's jaw tightened. "Then we can't break." I stared at her, surprised by the steel in her voice. "I've been an idiot," she continued, her words sharp. "I let him manipulate me, thinking I could outsmart him. But I see it now. He doesn't care about me. He doesn't care about anyone. He's a snake, and the only way to beat him is to cut off his head." A flicker of hope stirred in my chest. "Do you mean that?" "Yes," she said firmly. "Tell me what I need to do." 2 days later, I was out on bail. The conditions were strict, and I couldn't go near the restaurant or my accounts, but I was free to move. That was enough for now. Lauren met me outside the courthouse. She was still pale, her nerves frayed, but there was a determination in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. "I met with Susan," she said as we walked toward the car. "She gave me the rest of the files. Everything Daniel didn't want anyone to see. I've already sent copies to Tom." "That's good," I said, relief washing over me. "What's the next step?" "We need to bait him," I said. "Draw him into the open, where he can't hide behind lawyers or fake documents. If we can get him to act impulsively, we'll have him." "And how do we do that?" she asked. I hesitated, then said, We use what he values most: control. He's losing it, and that's what scares him. If we make him think he's winning again, he'll come to us." Lauren frowned. "That's risky. He won't play nice." "I'm not asking him to," I said. The plan took shape quickly. Lauren called Daniel, pretending to be desperate. She told him she was cutting ties with me, that she wanted to protect herself and Claire. She asked for his help. He bought it. Daniel agreed to meet her at a secluded restaurant after hours. He thought he was reeling her back in, but he didn't know about the tiny microphone she wore beneath her scarf. I waited in a car down the street, listening to the conversation through Tom's equipment. My fists clenched as I heard Daniel's smooth, condescending tone. "You made the right choice, Lauren," he said. "Rivers was always going to drag you down. With me, you and Claire will be safe." I don't know what to do anymore," Lauren said, her voice trembling just enough to sound convincing. "Mike won't listen to reason. He's ruining everything." Daniel laughed softly. "Let me handle Mike. By the time I'm finished, he won't be able to touch either of us." I leaned closer to the speaker, my pulse pounding. This was it. "And what about the restaurant?" Lauren asked. "The accounts." Daniel's voice dropped. "Once the investigation finishes, it'll all be mine. You don't need to worry about that." "Mine," I muttered, my teeth clenched. Lauren hesitated. "You're sure no one will trace it back to you?" "They won't," Daniel said confidently. "The documents were perfect, and the emails I fabricated were airtight. Mike's finished. You just need to sit back and let me take care of the rest." That was all I needed. Tom's contact at the FBI had been on standby for days. As soon as we had the recording, I sent it directly to him. By the next morning, Daniel Cross was under federal investigation. When the news broke, I sat with Lauren at the kitchen table, watching as the anchors dissected every angle of the story. Cross's empire was crumbling, his carefully crafted reputation shattered by his own hubris. Lauren reached for my hand. I looked at her, seeing the guilt and exhaustion still etched on her face. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I know," I said. The first few days after Daniel's arrest felt like walking on thin ice. The restaurant was still under scrutiny, the accounts were frozen, and every news segment reminded the world that I'd been accused of tax fraud, even if the evidence against me was crumbling. But the tide was turning. Tom called the morning after the arrest. His voice carried a rare note of optimism. "Mike, it's working. The feds are digging into everything Cross touched, and they're finding enough dirt to keep him tied up for years." "And the charges against me?" I asked, pacing the kitchen. "They're already questioning the validity of the emails. It's just a matter of time before they're dismissed. But you need to keep your head down until this blows over." "Head down," I repeated, glancing out the window where Claire played in the yard. "Sure." Easier said than done. Lauren and I spent that week in damage control. She reached out to suppliers, smoothing over the doubts Cross had planted. I called my lawyer, ensuring we had the paperwork ready to unfreeze the accounts as soon as the investigation cleared. But the hardest part was facing the people we knew. Tony, my restaurant manager, pulled me aside after the morning rush. The dining room was quiet, the faint hum of the kitchen filling the space. "You really didn't do it, did you?" he asked, his voice low. "No," I said, meeting his gaze. "But I let things get out of control. I should have seen this coming." Tony nodded slowly, his lips pressed into a thin line. "We've been through worse, boss. We'll get through this too." The restaurant reopened at half capacity the following week. The usual dinner crowd was thin, but the regulars still came. Mrs. Harris sat at her usual corner table, smiling warmly as I brought her coffee. A few families trickled in, and for the first time in weeks, the place felt alive again. Claire skipped into the kitchen that evening, waving a picture she'd drawn. It was us. Her, me, and Lauren standing outside the restaurant. "Mum said everything's going to be okay now," she said, her eyes bright. I knelt down, taking the drawing from her hands. She's right, sweetheart. We're going to be okay. That night, Lauren and I sat at the kitchen table, the weight of the past weeks pressing down on us. I spoke to Tom. I said, "They're dismissing the charges. Officially, we're clear." Lauren exhaled, a sound of relief and exhaustion. "It's over then." "Almost," I said. "Cross might be locked up, but his influence isn't gone. There's still fallout to deal with." She nodded, tracing the rim of her coffee mug with her finger. "I'm sorry, Mike, for everything, for letting him into our lives." I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. "We both made mistakes, but we survived. That's what matters." Her lips trembled, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. The next morning, a letter arrived in the mail. No postage, no return address, just my name scrawled across the front. I opened it cautiously, half expecting another threat. Instead, it was a single sheet of paper, typed and impersonal. "You've won this round, but the game's not over." My blood ran cold. I looked out the window, scanning the street for anything unusual. The neighborhood was quiet, the sunlight casting long shadows across the pavement. When I showed the letter to Lauren, she paled. "Do you think it's him?" "Maybe," I said, my voice tight. "Or someone working for him." That evening, I stood in the backyard, watching Claire chase fireflies under the fading sunlight. Lauren joined me, her arm brushing against mine. "We'll get through this," she said quietly. I nodded, though my gaze lingered on the horizon. Daniel might be in custody, but shadows of his influence still lingered. The news broke a week after I received the letter. Daniel Cross had been formally charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and bribery. Federal prosecutors described it as one of the most elaborate financial schemes in recent history. I watched the broadcast from the restaurant office, my fists clenched as the reporters replayed clips of Daniel being escorted out of a courthouse in cuffs. His face was unreadable, his signature smirk gone. "Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy," Tom said, leaning in the doorway. "This is just the beginning," I replied. "He's still got people on the outside. If we're not careful, they'll pick up where he left off." Tom nodded. "True, but his network's collapsing. The feds are freezing his assets, his board's abandoning ship, and his firm's been delisted from the exchange. He's done, Mike." I wanted to believe that, but the letter still sat in my desk drawer, a reminder that Daniel had been one step ahead before. "What about us?" I asked. "Your charges are gone," Tom said. "Officially dismissed, and the feds know you cooperated. If anything, you've got more goodwill now than you did before." "Good," I said, "because I'm not just going to rebuild. I'm going to make sure no one like him ever gets close again." By the time the lunch rush started, the restaurant was busier than it had been in weeks. Regulars poured in, their smiles cautious but genuine. A local paper had run a piece clearing my name, calling me the small business owner who stood up to the giant. Lauren slipped into the kitchen, tying an apron around her waist. She hadn't worked the floor in years, but today she insisted. "It's time we showed people we're still here," she said, handing me a plate. "Side by side, huh?" I teased. She smiled faintly. "That's how we started. That's how we'll keep going." The call from Susan came that evening. "Have you seen the news?" she asked, her voice taut. "I've seen the headlines," I said. "There's something you need to know," she said. "Daniel's people are scattering, but a few of them are trying to salvage what's left of his empire. They've been reaching out to anyone still loyal to him, promising deals, favors, whatever it takes to keep the machine alive." My grip on the phone tightened. "You think they'll come after me again?" "They might, or they might focus on rebuilding somewhere else. Either way, don't relax." "Not yet." "I won't," I promised. The next few days were a whirlwind. The restaurant's business picked up, and for the first time in weeks, the accounts weren't just stable, they were growing. Customers began returning in earnest, bringing friends and sharing stories of loyalty. Lauren and I worked late most nights, collapsing into bed with aching feet and tired smiles. One evening, as the restaurant closed for the night, a man in a dark suit walked in. He looked out of place among the tired staff cleaning up, his posture too sharp, his gaze too cold. "Can I help you?" I asked, stepping forward. He smiled faintly, pulling a business card from his pocket. "Mr. Rivers, I represent an organization interested in opportunities like yours. If you'd like to discuss expansion or partnerships, I'd be happy to arrange a meeting." I stared at the card, my gut twisting. "No thanks," I said, my voice firm. "We're doing fine on our own." His smile didn't falter, but his eyes darkened. "Suit yourself, but if you change your mind—" "I won't," I said, cutting him off. He nodded politely, tucking the card back into his pocket. "Good luck, Mr. Rivers." As he left, Lauren came up behind me, her expression tense. "Who was that?" she asked. "Someone we don't want to know," I said. She frowned, but didn't press further. That night, as I locked the restaurant doors, I couldn't shake the feeling that the fight wasn't over. Daniel might be out of the picture, but his influence was still casting long shadows. Lauren appeared beside me, her hand slipping into mine. "We'll be ready," she said, as if reading my thoughts. I nodded, pulling her closer. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. The morning was quiet, the kind of stillness I hadn't felt in months. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, casting long streaks of gold across the counter. I sipped my coffee, watching Claire sit at the table with a puzzle spread out in front of her. Lauren stood by the stove, flipping pancakes. She hadn't made breakfast in years, claiming the early mornings were my domain. But today felt different. "Pancakes?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She smiled over her shoulder. "Figured it was time to turn things around. Besides, Claire requested them." "Extra syrup?" Claire piped up, not looking away from her puzzle. Lauren laughed, the sound light and warm in a way I hadn't heard in too long. For a moment, the world felt normal again. After breakfast, Lauren and I sat outside on the porch. Claire had run off to the yard, chasing butterflies with a plastic net. The air smelled of fresh grass and hope. "I was wrong," Lauren said, breaking the silence. I turned to her, frowning. "About what?" "Everything," she said, her voice soft but steady. "About Daniel. About thinking I could fix things on my own. About shutting you out when I should have been letting you in." I leaned back, letting her words hang in the air for a moment. "You thought you were doing the right thing," I said finally. "I get that. But Lauren, you hurt me. You hurt us." Her face crumpled slightly, her composure slipping. "I know. And I don't expect forgiveness overnight. I want to make it right, Mike. I want to rebuild what we had." I studied her, the sincerity in her eyes, the tension in her posture. "We'll get there," I said, my voice firm. "But it's going to take time. Trust isn't something you snap your fingers and fix." She nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "I'm ready to do the work. Whatever it takes." That afternoon, we walked into the restaurant together, Claire skipping ahead of us. The staff greeted us warmly, the tension of the last few weeks replaced by cautious optimism. Lauren rolled up her sleeves and joined me behind the counter, taking orders and greeting customers. It felt like stepping back in time, to when we'd first started this place. Before the stress, before the distance, before Daniel. Claire sat at her usual booth, drawing a new picture. When she held it up later, I smiled. It was us again, standing in front of the restaurant, holding hands. "You forgot the pancakes," I teased. She grinned. "Next time." That evening, after closing, Lauren and I stood side by side in the quiet dining room. The lights were dim, the chairs stacked on the tables. "We're going to be okay," she said softly. I glanced at her, seeing not just the guilt and exhaustion of the past few months, but also the determination. "Yeah," I said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "We are." In the days that followed, things began to settle. The restaurant grew busier, the accounts stabilized, and the whispers of scandal faded. But I knew better than to relax completely. The letter was still in my drawer, a reminder that Daniel's reach extended far beyond his cell, and the man in the suit, his words still lingered in the back of my mind. For now, though, I focused on what mattered: my family, my business, and the life we were rebuilding together. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. Epilogue. The restaurant was bustling, every table filled, the clinking of silverware and the hum of conversation creating a comforting symphony. Claire stood near the counter, showing off her latest drawing to Tony, who laughed and ruffled her hair. Business was thriving again. The community had rallied behind us after the scandal broke, their loyalty stronger than ever. The restaurant felt alive, a place where hope had taken root. But beneath the surface, I couldn't shake the unease. Lauren noticed it too. She'd catch me staring out the window, lost in thought, or glancing over my shoulder whenever we walked home at night. "It's over, Mike," she'd say, her hand brushing mine. "Maybe," I'd reply, but my voice lacked conviction. The news of Daniel's sentencing arrived in the mail one morning, a terse letter from the courts confirming his 15-year sentence for fraud and embezzlement. I held the paper in my hand, rereading it twice. 15 years, Lauren said, peering over my shoulder. Her tone was flat, but her eyes betrayed her relief. "Not enough," I muttered. "Mike," she started, but I shook my head. "Men like him don't just disappear," I said. "They wait. They plan. And when the moment's right, they strike." She didn't argue. She knew better now. Weeks passed, and the memory of Daniel began to fade. The restaurant grew busier. Claire's laughter filled the house again, and Lauren and I found our rhythm. But there were moments, small, fleeting moments, that reminded me the shadows hadn't entirely lifted. A car idling too long outside the house, a supplier calling to say their prices were suddenly undercut by a new competitor, a man in a gray suit sitting alone at a table, his eyes lingering on me just a second too long before leaving without ordering. Lauren told me I was imagining things. Tom told me to stay vigilant. I split the difference, quietly shoring up every weak spot in our business, keeping my family close, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It came one crisp autumn evening, as the last customers left the restaurant. The air was cool, the sky streaked with the colors of dusk. Claire sat in the corner booth, finishing her homework while Lauren locked up the kitchen. I wiped down the counter, my movements steady, my mind drifting to thoughts of home. Then I saw it, a plain white envelope on the counter, stark against the polished wood. I picked it up slowly, my pulse quickening. There was no postage, no address, just my name, written in sharp, deliberate handwriting. "Mike?" Lauren called from the kitchen. "1 second," I said, my voice tight. I opened the envelope, my hand steady despite the knot forming in my chest. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. I unfolded it, the words scrawled across the page in the same precise handwriting. "You thought you won. The game isn't over. I'm coming for what's mine." My blood ran cold. "Mike." Lauren's voice was closer now, concerned. I crumpled the letter in my fist and turned, forcing a smile. "Everything's fine. Just an old receipt I missed." She frowned but didn't press. Later that night, as the house settled into its quiet rhythm, I sat alone in the kitchen, the crumpled letter on the table before me. The words echoed in my mind, their weight undeniable. Daniel Cross was behind bars, but his reach hadn't ended. He still had power, still had allies willing to carry out his plans. The shadows were back, darker and colder than ever. But this time, I was ready. I smoothed the letter out, staring at the words again before folding it carefully and tucking it into my drawer, next to the first one he'd sent. Whatever Daniel Cross had planned, he wouldn't catch me off guard. Not again. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.